That now, find the chat. You all here live, or even those watching the recording, where there'll be a chat feature as well, are a very special group of people who are interested in doing things better, maximizing your impact, making a bigger difference, not necessarily doing things the same old way, but really focused on getting results. So I want you to put who you are in the chat, not just for me, but for each other, so that you can kind of get to know who you are, because there might be really helpful people for you to connect with in the chat. By the way, Jamie is an expert grant writer. She owns a grant writing agency. So she's definitely someone to know. Michael, who's in the room, is a professional marketer. He runs a marketing agency. So there are people here who may be helpful to know. Plus, it's always helpful to get to know your peers and get peer support there. Okay, so let's dive in. At the end, we'll do like a talking Q&A. Before the end, if you want to stop me or have a quick question, pop it in the chat. I'll try to watch that as I go. If I'm ignoring your question, it's probably because the answer is either coming up or I'm going to give it a longer address it at the end. So let's just make sure you are in the right place. This is how high-performing nonprofits can organize their boards to maximize impact with 5 simple steps. You probably know who I am or you wouldn't be here. I'm Sarah. I love helping nonprofit organizations and their leaders like you get focused on making the biggest impact possible. Just a little bit about me professionally. I have an undergraduate degree in international studies from the University of Chicago. I've lived in a lot of places around the world. I have a master's degree in humanistic multicultural education. So if you have any kind of DEI related questions or general education questions, that feel free to ask those along the way. And I have over 18 years of experience running nonprofits as CEO. I've been a nonprofit founder, board member, consultant, and speaker. So I've kind of worn a lot of hats, as probably many of you have. Personally, I live in the Hudson Valley. Do I have any Hudson? I know I have at least one Hudson Valley person here. I'm a mom. I was just talking with Jamie about that. I race sailboats. I love cooking. Oh, and you know, it's not on this list. That's a common thing. I'm totally gluten-free, like extra, it's an allergy, gluten-free. Do I have any fellow gluten-free folks here? Pop it in the chat. Give me a little GF if you're gluten-free. Give me a little mom if you're a mom or a dad in the club. And I doubt, usually we don't have any sailboat racers in the room, but if we do, let me know. Wonderful. Let's see. Great. Yay, United Way, wonderful, in Pennsylvania. What an active nonprofit culture in Pennsylvania. A dad, yay. So before we start, we're doing this live right now. There's going to be a 7-day replay, but I don't want you to think of this as, oh, I'm kind of going to tune out and I'll get to it eventually, right? I want you to focus, ask your questions today. Your questions will help other people as well as yourself. And there's going to be a lot of information coming. So I want you to really focus on paying attention to this, limited time that we have. We have an hour. Just there's so many things that can distract us in this world, but I want us to be focused for a moment. Can we do that? Can we give me a yes in the chat if you feel like you can focus, or a thumbs up if you're on video? Do you want to see some thumbs up? Yes, some thumbs up. I know focus is hard these days. If you're a parent, you're worried about your kid. Does my kid have an attention span longer than a YouTube short? Yes, yes, awesome. The slides will not be available, but the recording will. And stay tuned. My gift to you for showing up live. You can tell, taking action, right? I love teaching, but more than I love teaching, I love to see people taking action and get results. And that doesn't happen if you don't take action to get those results. So my present to you for being here live, those are my like super action takers, is I'm going to give you these templates worth thousands of dollars. Many hours of my life went into creating these, and you will get them at the end. So stay to the end if you want those templates. Yay, yes, Lauren can focus. Awesome. So I want to know who you are here, right? So does this sound like you? And give me the letter in the chat of any or all of these that you have experienced. I guess we could do E for all of the above. So do you have a board that's unengaged? B, do you have a board that's overworked? C, do you have a board that gets stuck in the weeds? Do you have a board that's confused about who should be doing what? Give me a letter, or if it's none of these, let me know what it is. A, yeah, I see a C and a D, a B, C, and D, an A and a D. Great, an A, excellent. So we're gonna work on fixing a lot of these things, and hopefully it's going to be a lot easier than you have ever experienced before. A yes, is that all of the above? The yes, wonderful. And I'm wondering who has tried any of these things already. Have you tried getting training for your board? Have you tried doing retreats with your board? Have you tried begging your board? And did any of these things work? You know, you can let me know, like, if you tried any of these things, and give me like a, 50% successful, 0% successful, 100% successful. What have you tried already? Begging and training. When I first wrote begging on this slide, I was like, it's kind of a joke, but the truth is I've heard a lot of executive directors, especially, or board chairs, like they're just, please, anything, please. Excellent. All three, yeah. Training worked for the American Lung Association. Is it still working, or did it fade over time, Michael? I'm curious. Training and begging, I see. Michael, I'd love to know. I'm going to watch for your answer as I move on. Oh, you're no longer there. Okay, so there you go. So, and I think you're probably here because you're the kind of person who just wants to stop wasting time doing things that aren't really moving the needle forward for your nonprofit. I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, and I was saying, of course, everything depends how you define success, right? But for me, success in anything we're doing at a nonprofit is, are we making the biggest impact that we can in this moment, right? That's what success is for me. So moving the needle for your nonprofit, to me, means making a bigger impact. That's what I'm measuring by. So here I want to tell you that if you've tried those things and they didn't work, it's not your fault. It's not that the training was necessarily bad or that you've just got duds on your board. It's that the whole system that we've been telling boards to operate under is flawed. So remember, I love helping nonprofit organizations, and mostly I work with their leaders, their CEOs, their leadership teams. But even though these were my clients who were doing incredible work at their organization, I still was hearing, even from them, my board won't let me do that. My board isn't engaged. My board is overworked. My board just made a stupid decision. There's drama on my board. And it got to the point that I said, enough is enough, right? If nothing is working for these folks, and I know already that these are executive directors and leadership teams who are making great decisions, who are putting together great plans, and if they're even having these problems, what is going on here? And we've got to fix this problem so it doesn't keep emerging with such frequency. So I locked myself in a hotel room. This is the actual hotel room. Those are my socks. And I dove into nonprofit board history, which immediately took me back 300 years prior to the US even being a country. And I found that this problem around boards really started way back then. What is it you want to know? 300 years ago, in case you're a history person, it was the formation of Harvard University, which is not only one of the very first corporations in the Americas, but it was also basically the first nonprofit. And it was formed in, and we got any Harvard people here? 1630 something. I forget the exact date. So, what did I find as the pattern over those 300 years? The development of how our boards have been, you know, what we say is their job and what we say their roles are, came out of this history of wealthy and powerful donors trying to find ways to stay in control of the money they donated. So, you know, here I am saying, I want to design a board that helps a nonprofit make the biggest impact possible. And what I'm telling you is the current kind of status quo job description that most people are using came with this as the agenda, not make the most impactful nonprofit possible. It came with this agenda, how to keep wealthy, powerful donors in control of the money they donated. So it's no surprise that if this was the goal, it is very good at producing this result. It's not so good at making the most impactful nonprofits possible. Does this surprise anybody? It surprised me that I found that this had been going on for a very long time. Anybody, give me a yes in the chat if this is a surprising history lesson for you. Anybody not surprised? Give me a no if you're not surprised. I want to see you in the chat. Still rings true today. Yeah. My other folks, Stan, Faye. I know you used to be a teacher. I'll call you out by name. Not surprised. Yeah. Not at all. So you've experienced this. You've probably seen the evidence of this. So then there's a whole nother problem, right? Yes, sad but true, is that these so-called best practices are overcomplicated and often don't work, which is very unfortunate as well, right? Because we want things to work. I don't know about you, but I want everything I'm trying to do to work. If somebody says, oh, well, we've always done that way, I'm like, I don't care. If it doesn't work, and we shouldn't do it. So I want to give you some examples of what doesn't work and just using our kind of logic test here to explain why they don't work. So I'm not going to go through, there's kind of in the current version of these so-called best practices, there are 10 roles of the nonprofit board. And I'm just going to go over 2 of them to just give you an example of what's not working and why it's not working, besides the history lesson. So this one here says, one of the board's foremost responsibilities is to secure adequate resources for the organization to fulfill its mission. So to me, this sounds like the job description of an entire fundraising department, right? Or development office or development department or function or role in an organization, right? So if this is, does everybody agree with me? Does this sound like, you know, this is what our development team, this is their job description, probably as a team, at least probably whole one person. Yeah, Jamie, I see raising your hand. So if most of our boards are volunteer, part-time folks, right? Let's not ask them to do a professional job that people need to do full-time, and they need to be paid to do them, because most people don't do very good full-time work if they're not getting paid, right? So this is one example. It just doesn't pass the logic test. Here's another one. The board should clearly articulate the organization's mission, accomplishments, and goals to the public and garner support from the community through advocacy. Again, another whole department here, right? This is like the marketing and communications department's job here, right? This is not a job description we should be giving to a group of part-time volunteers who may or may not have marketing expertise. And essentially, if you take this list of 10 things that you can find out there by Googling if you want to see it, it basically says that the board's job is to be responsible for everything. Now, who here has ever been on a board or seen this happen where the executive director and the board are having some tension because it's not clear whose job, any particular thing is, that they're kind of stepping on each other's toes and having power struggle? Yeah, Stan, you've seen that. Do I have any other hands? I can see, if those of you on video, you can just wave. Yep, Michael, you've seen that. That's because this is also the same job description we give to executive directors. Your job is to be responsible for everything. What happens when we tell two people that they have the same job? They get confused about who should do what, right? We haven't divvied up anything. And that is just one more reason why it is time for a new job description. It is time for a job description that is clearly delineates there's a difference between the leadership, team, employee, staff's role and the board's role, and one that is specifically designed to help create the maximum amount of impact for the nonprofit, not, perpetuate our system of power and inequities and biases. So I'm going to just give it to you right up front. In summary, and then I'm going to break it all down for you. The board's job should be quality control. Another word we can use for this is oversight. BoardSource makes a good case also for talking about using the word oversight, but I like to use the word quality control because in our gut, almost everybody has a good sense of what quality control is and what it isn't. Quality control isn't making it. Quality control is checking it, right? Making sure that it is up to standards. So today, I'm going to teach you the 5 steps, which are the 5 pieces of the job description, the 5 things your board should be doing. And these things result in countless hours saved annually, which kind of resolves a lot of issues around boards being overworked. It's going to improve your board executive relationship because there's no longer going to be confusion about who's doing what or people stepping on each other's toes. It's going to attract better board members. It's going to increase board engagement, and it's going to get better outcomes overall for your nonprofit, which is that ding, 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 that big thing that stick that I'm measuring everything else by. So let's dive into them. Number 1, and notice very carefully, right? I'm not using that language ensure, which is very broad. Ensure is like doing, making sure it happens. Confirm is very specific. Confirm means double checking. Confirm means looking and seeing. Confirm means verifying. Confirm does not mean deciding, doing, or directing. Can we give me some hands or some I understand or a yes in the chat? Can we be clear on the use of this word? Yes, confirm. Confirm is very different from ensure, and I'm using it very intentionally here. So the first part of this, confirming that we want to be, I didn't read to you the summary here, right? So the first big item is to confirm there is progress towards a clear purpose. Yay, my yeses. Thanks, Michael, for participating. So what does this mean, having progress towards a clear purpose? Well, first we have to confirm there is a clearly defined purpose. So we're asking, do we have a mission? Is the mission specific? Is the mission unique? We're confirming that the organization has well-defined goals and tactics. So we're checking, is there a written strategy? Do the tactics in the strategy make sense for achieving the goals in the strategy? We are confirming that the staff has a clear process for addressing issues and making decisions, right? So the process, we're asking, does this process look for issues proactively? Does the process promote informed decision-making? Does the process, does decision-making, is it bottlenecked by one person, or is decision-making spread around so that the decisions can be made quickly and no one person is a bottleneck. And we're confirming that the strategy includes a solid financial plan. So we're asking, does this financial plan take both a short and a long-term view? Are there resources invested into securing future revenue, right? That's really, really important of a financial plan. So here are the 4 mistakes I want you to avoid in this role. Mistake 1. The board does not define the purpose, right? So because if the board defines the purpose, right, which is define is code for decide, then we don't have a lot of oversight, right? Is it better if I double check my own decisions, or if it better if I like run it by Jamie and ask her like, hey Jamie, what do you think about this decision? Do you think it's a good idea or not? So if Jamie is giving me some oversight and it's separate from my own self, that is much better oversight. Also, staff and clients, in my experience, and I've done a lot of mission work, purpose work with nonprofits, and it is always the staff and the clients who tend to be more visionary and have a clearer sense of what the key purpose really needs to be compared to boards or other stakeholders. Mistake number 2 is a big one, right? Who's been told that boards are responsible for strategy? And here I am saying the board should not decide the strategy, because if the board decides the strategy, then there's no oversight for the strategy. And the board doesn't necessarily, usually they don't have all the information that you get from working day to day in the organization to determine what the right goals are or know which tactics are likely to work. And mistake number 3 is the board approving the financial plan, right? So approve is code for decide. And if the board is deciding what the financial plan should be, then the financial plan has no oversight. And I can share with you a case study in a moment of the organization that did this. They let go of budget approval, and actually their financial plan has way more oversight, and the board is way more engaged around understanding it and monitoring it than they had ever been before. And also the board doesn't really have the information needed to determine the best way to spend and receive money. And what I have observed with my own clients is that whether or not budgets would get approved in the old model is really a factor of not how good the budget was, not how strong a plan it was, but how good a sales job the executive director or the CFO could give to the board. Student Television Network implemented this. You can read the full case study on my website, pivotground.com, under free resources. But their board chair says, I like the process of not approving a dollar amount. I work with other organizations. I wish I could get them to do the same thing. And Sherry, who is their executive director, said, when my board wasn't worried about final numbers, they actually asked questions like, does this match our goals? Meaning they ask questions about, is this spending going to produce the kinds of results, the kinds of goals that we're looking to accomplish? And mistake number 4 is the staff has no clear process for addressing issues and making decisions. Whoops. So there's just missing this well-defined process of how are we going to make decisions, the structure of decision making, who's going to be involved, and how are we going to look for issues that come up along the way. How to do that is way beyond what we can do today in our short time, but that is why clients who we work with get specific tools to clarify their purpose, a strategic planning framework, financial planning templates, financial planning training and live coaching, and a clear and comprehensive process for identifying issues, making informed decisions, and tracking progress, because these are all the things that staff need incredible structure and support and processes in order to do well, and we want to make sure that that gets done. One client who was in the Thrive program said, this is like their actual form, we have clearer strategic documents and plans, and more useful and productive management team meetings, and more manageable staff work plans. Okay, number 2 of 5. The next thing the board needs to do is confirm that the organization has capable leaders in place. So leaders are really important, right? Because they're the people in our organizations who guide us into the future. And so within this, we have a couple kind of sub things, right? So confirm the CEO is capable, right? So just double checking it. Is our CEO qualified? Is our CEO sufficiently compensated? Because if they're not, you might lose your CEO. And let me tell you the secret that most CEOs admit in the Thrive program. Ron says we only have 3 people and life seems overwhelming at times. Yes, 3 board members or 3 staff. I'll tell you, a lot of organizations are understaffed, and we fix that in the Thrive program regularly. So if you want to talk about how to staff up, Ron, we can check in by email on that. But confirming that the CEO is sufficiently compensated, this can take a little time to adjust to, but if they're not, they are likely to leave. And the secret that I was about to tell you, I know everyone's waiting, what's the secret, Sarah, that CEOs say in the Thrive program? They tell me not to say, but you need to know. If you're a board member, you need to know this. Most CEOs spend quite a bit of time thinking about just quitting and being done with it, because it's a hard job. It is a thankless job often, and often they are underpaid and overworked. And that is a recipe for people wanting to quit. And it is very, very risky and expensive for your organization when your CEO leaves. And you want to make sure that your CEO has sufficient supports and resources. So confirming that they have those. Now my slides need to move along. You need to confirm that there are enough leaders in place. Ron, so this right speaks directly to what you just said, right? Oftentimes there aren't enough leaders, or I've seen organizations with like 1 leader and then like 20 part-time staff. 1 leader is not enough for 20 part-time staff. And again, I see even organizations who on the outside look like they have enough staff. When you get under the cover and kind of under the hood and look a little bit, you realize there aren't enough leaders among those staff. And you need to confirm that leaders have opportunities for additional training and support as needed. So you're confirming that there is professional development and not professional development opportunities going on, that there is coaching and training in place for staff. So these are the 3 mistakes to avoid with step 2. The board tries to direct the CEO rather than confirm they are capable. So if the board decides and tells the CEO what to do, now the board is leading the organization and making those decisions, not the CEO and their staff. And so accountability is reduced, oversight is reduced, and we get into kind of a downward spiral of making bad decisions and actually having less accountability. If you can't confirm, if you're concerned that your CEO is not capable or does not have the resources, then you can mention that and say, hey, we think there's an issue here. And ultimately you may have to let go of the CEO if they're truly not capable. And that would be the decision. And we're going to talk about that. Mistake number 2 is the board restricts the CEO from hiring enough staff, right? So hopefully if you've been following along, you would never be tempted to make this mistake, but I call this one out specifically because I've seen it so many times. And this is really, really, really difficult, and it's hard to fix. CEOs and their leadership teams need to be hiring enough staff to do the key functions. And if they don't, you are just like, cutting off your own feet as an organization. And mistake number 3 is that organizations hire whoever will do the job for the money. And they don't spend the time and the money and the energy to get a great fit person. And let me tell you, it is more expensive in the long run to underpay people, and it is more expensive and inefficient in the long run to have wrong fit people on your team, because they undermine pretty much everything that's going on in the organization, not just their own work. Ron says, I love this comment, declining revenue equals lower staffing levels, aim in for the wrong fit for the price. Yes, Ron, I need to send you a training where I talk about this exact cycle, about you have less money, and so then you cut your expenses, and then you have even less money, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. In that training, I teach you how to reverse that cycle so you have more and more money and more staff and more time. and we will do that. Jamie asks, can I address how this might work with a cooperative leadership framework? Great question. I'm going to save that one to the end to make sure we have enough time, but Jamie, remind me to come back to it. One of our clients in Thrive said, I'm learning to surround myself with the right team and not be afraid to let someone go when it's not a good fit. Today, I let someone go that did not meet our criteria. She was relieved, and now we can move forward. Changing over a staff, and we've had CEOs who come in and like 90% of their staff are wrong fit, and we have to like change out the entire team. That's a slow process, but it is a worthwhile process. We've also taken staff. We've had clients in the Thrive program. We had one who was a single staff, the only staff member. She wasn't even getting paid at the time. And within 6 months, she was getting paid and had a paid assistant, and then started growing like crazy from there. Step number 3 is to confirm there is a system of leadership in place. This is really, really big, everyone. So most people, when they talk about leadership, they talk about just the people, but there's a whole nother piece of leadership, and that's the system of leadership that's in place. So I want to give you some examples of these. So one example of a system of leadership is in the United States, we have a democratic system, although I heard recently that we were just downgraded to like a pseudo democracy by this agency that like evaluates countries around the world. But we all know this model, so I use it as an example, right? So in our US democracy, we have this system of checks and balances between the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. And we have lots of processes that are baked into the system. What has made this system so robust as a form of leadership is it creates great consistency from one leader to the next. And it's like our guide rails, right? It keeps us generally, if we want to talk about making organizations more sustainable and more consistent over time, and being able to have great results, we want to think about their system of leadership even more so than the individual people who are fulfilling leadership roles. Just some other systems. So we're all kind of thinking about leadership systems and maybe having some aha moments. We have autocratic and oligarchic systems. So monarchy is an example of these. Typically, these types of leadership systems are all about hierarchies of authority of people in charge. So you have like people who are in charge of other people, who are in charge of other people. And we have this kind of system of leadership is characteristic of is fewer processes are baked into the system. Typically, most of the processes are around selecting who's going to be a person with power. And then we have totally decentralized systems, many of which have influenced the modern business world greatly. So consensus systems. I came from a Quaker background, so I could tell you a lot about census versus consensus if anybody is interested in those topics. Agile, if anybody's heard about Agile or Scrum in the tech world, this is based around decentralized leadership systems thinking. Peter Drucker's management by objectives. And in these decentralized systems, the individual leaders, the people, are less important than the system that holds it all together. And it really de-emphasizes putting power in individuals' hands and really emphasizes collaborative work and letting the system help produce results. So there's 2 mistakes to avoid here. Mistake number 1 is just not having a system of leadership. So I'd love to know just quickly, before right now, if I'd asked you what kind of system of leadership do you have in place, would you have had any sort of answer for that? Or would you have been like, oh my God, I never thought of that? Put never thought of that in the chat, or give me like let's do a 1. We'll keep your typing fingers relaxed. A 1 if that was you. And in this moment, now that we're talking about it, can you quickly tell me which of these 3 types you think you might have in place, either intentionally or de facto at your nonprofit? Love to hear that in the chat. And while you put that in, I'll say, and I'm always curious, I'm taking notes, right, on what systems. What I see is Most nonprofits have basically an oligarchy, a hierarchy of power type system in place at their organization. Which begins to speak, Jamie, to your question around shared leadership and partnership, right? If we start to get into, which is it about, are we talking about a power structure? What kind of system of leadership are we talking about? Having a system of leadership is really important because it increases sustainability. That depends too on what kind of system you have. It can increase your ability to get results and improves the ability to provide oversight. Stan, thank you for sharing. You have a democratic type system. I love that. Excellent. And mistake number 2 is relying primarily on an autocratic or an oligarchic system, which is unfortunately what I see, not just in most nonprofits, but in many, many businesses. This is the kind system of leadership that they are relying on. These types of systems are not good for innovation. They're very good for keeping things in control and in line, but they're not good for innovation. And one thing that is really special about the nonprofit sector is most nonprofits need to be excellent innovators because they're solving the world's most complex unsolved problems. And you can't do that without innovation. And they tend to place the focus on power and control rather than outcomes and results. Whoops. For those of you wondering, in the Thrive program, we teach our clients the impact method, which is a system of leadership. And as far as I know, it is still the only system of leadership designed specifically for nonprofits. And it is a hybrid of a democratic and a decentralized model. I developed that method just like I'm developed what I'm teaching you today out of need for things to work better. Glenna Frey from Kidney Donor Conversation said this method and tools gives you everything you need to really define what you want to do and then have an actual plan in place to do it. And Jennifer Cruz, who I love it when she joins me, Pivot Ground has a very holistic approach. That's the impact method. After implementing it, there was more time in my day. And I hear that one again and again and again. People get more time in their day, and then those leaders are able to focus on everything else that matters most. So step 4 is to ensure that a CEO is in place, right? And now I have used that word ensure as opposed to confirm here because you may or may not make a decision. So one option here is to hire the CEO directly, right? So the board has the authority to directly select a CEO. And if they want, select the process for hiring that right fit candidate for a CEO. There are companies who specialize in this, and a board can just hire a company and have them take them through the process and then make the decision. But ensure doesn't mean you have to do it. Ensure says you have to make sure it gets done, right? So the board could also choose to delegate the CEO to a hiring process. So if your organization already has a well-established hiring process designed to get right fit people and already has a proven track record and isn't run by your CEO, then I don't see any reason why you shouldn't use that exact process that's already working for everybody else in your nonprofit to go through the hiring of the CEO process. You could also follow a democratic election model, and there are certain situations in which that would be totally appropriate. And the next thing that's really important with ensuring that you have a CEO in place is making sure that you as a board have your CEO's back, right? So this means offering feedback, offering support, showing appreciation, sharing your expertise where you have it, and taking in what your CEO communicates and ask clarifying questions. These are all not decisions. These are behaviors that you as a board and as individuals on a board should be exhibiting in order to have your CEO's back. 3 mistakes to avoid with number 4. Mistake number 1, firing your CEO without having a replacement ready. This is an example of gross negligence on the behalf of a board. I'm sorry that I have to say it here, but it is here because I have seen this happen on multiple occasions. So I'm putting it out there really clear so nobody who's heard this training ever makes this mistake. We understand why? Give me a yes or a nod or a wave if this makes sense, right? It makes total sense. Excellent. Yay. Stan, you're my star thumb giver. I love it. Mistake number 2. Reducing communication with the CEO when the board has concerns. Now, we do this because most people are conflict averse, and I totally understand why. And it's the first thing I want to do when I'm having concerns around somebody is I just don't want to say anything. But to be a good leader in this regard, and this is an area where the board needs to show leadership, you must do the opposite. You must increase communication. And this is true in all of your life. Whenever you are in a relationship that you want to stay in, if you're having challenges, you need to increase communication, not decrease it. And it is your professional responsibility as board members, and it's true for your CEO and leading their staff, that you need to lean in and communicate more. So some examples of communicating less: don't go into executive session without your CEO. And don't worry about how the CEO will respond to critical feedback. Do practice good communication skills, which is more than we have time to teach today, but do not avoid the feedback altogether. Also, people ask me this all the time when they're thinking about like doing the impact method. Oftentimes people are transitioning in a transition period. They know one CEO is retiring or leaving and a new CEO is coming in, and they say, well, should I wait for the new CEO to come in and then put a leadership system in place? And the answer is absolutely not. Put the leadership system in place first, and then hire the CEO, right? If you hire the CEO first, you're kind of giving a lot of power and authority to a single person. But if you put that system in place first and then hire the CEO to operate within that system, it's going to be really strengthen your organization. Also, you will attract better candidates because nobody really wants to be hired to clean up a hot mess, right? I kind of like doing it, but I charge a lot of money to do it because it's a lot of work to clean up a hot mess, right? So you will get a better CEO for a better rate if you have a clean, functioning, well-worked, high functioning nonprofit. That's partly why our clients get the impact method, so that they have a system in place to help them be more sustainable and successful through any kind of transition. We teach a leadership blueprint that makes defining the role of the CEO in comparison to all the other potential staff roles very, very clear. We teach that to boards in our board retreat as well. And our programs are open to both new CEOs and CEOs who are in transition. Sherry, who is a new CEO, said, after only a few months of working with Sarah, I made more progress as an executive director than the entire previous year. The other part of that I didn't have space to include here is, she had to work hard, right? Lawrence here, I see her nodding, right? In the Thrive program, we don't I'm nice, but we don't sugarcoat things, and we point things out when people are making mistakes, and we all support each other, but I push folks to do the hard work that is going to make a difference. Number 5, coming down the home stretch here. Number 5 is to serve as the emergency brake. And what do we all know about emergency brakes? We're all trained in this. Only pull the emergency brake if it's actually an emergency. So let me define a nonprofit board level emergency for you. It's pretty straightforward. If it's illegal, you need to pull the emergency brake. If it's unethical, you need to pull the emergency brake. And if it is grossly ineffective, you need to pull the emergency brake. Not like a little ineffective or we're not sure if it's working or not, but just totally grossly ineffective, negligent behavior, something egregious. Does this make sense? Emergency brake? Good. 2 mistakes with the emergency brake. They're really straightforward, so this will be quick. Stopping an activity that isn't an emergency, right? So only make decisions to stop an activity that is that is illegal, unethical, or grossly ineffective. And number two, this one's a little less clear cut, is prescribing the solution, right? So pulling the emergency brake says, no, you have to stop doing that right now. You're saying this to your leadership team, your staff who are working at the nonprofit. But once you say stop, now you need to leave it to the staff to decide what the alternative solution or direction or approach will be. Because if you start deciding, if you start prescribing, now we're losing oversight, we're losing our quality control. You're starting to make the decisions instead of your staff. If you have a CEO who you're having to pull the emergency brake on regularly, that's your clue that you probably need to replace them. That's also why, so our clients who are working with us, their boards don't typically need to pull the emergency brake unless I reach out to them and say it's time to pull the emergency brake, but that has yet to happen because we're working very closely with leadership teams to give them the tools and the training and the frameworks they need to not be doing anything illegal, not be doing anything that's grossly ineffective or negligent or anything like that. And, if you're wondering, we actually do, most of my work with clients is done in a group setting with other executive directors. And this provides a really big support to them. And because this is not an approach that a lot of organizations are used to, especially larger nonprofits who are in the millions, which this organization is, a multi-million-dollar nonprofit. Erica, the executive director, said, I really appreciated the group coaching, especially once I got oriented to using the Thrive tools or the Impact Method tools and approach. There are so few places where I am in a room with other executive directors and it's pure support. There's no competition, no judgment, no need to perform, just support and the opportunity to learn from the few people who truly understand what it's like to walk in your shoes. One of the challenges for executive directors, and where are my executive directors here? I know there's a few of you here. Is that being that kind of leader can be a bit lonely and a bit isolating, and it adds a lot of value to them and increases their ability to do their job well when they have a place to bring up their concerns that would not necessarily be appropriate to bring up to their whole staff. They're kind of like not fully baked yet. And so it becomes really important to have a group setting to do that. So just to recap quickly here, there's a lot of bad advice out there disguised as best practices. I always encourage you, if you start to get that itch, like this doesn't really quite seem to add up, to go do your own research. But in this case, I did the research. I'm still researching more on it. But it is clearly time for a new board description, and that is quality control. For those of you who need the quick snapshot of all 5 things in one screen, if you were to take a screenshot, this would be the one. These are all 5 things. And if you'll notice, 1 through 3 fall into the category of oversight or accountability. And 4 and 5 are 2 very special types of decision-making authority for board members. Hopefully you got a chance for your screenshots. At the end, I can come back if you need. It's almost bonus time. This is my reminder. It's almost bonus time. But you came here today because you care about making an impact and you want your board to be working for impact, not against it. And you need something that actually works. And so I want to leave you with a few tips about the mind shifts that are going to need to happen in order to make this take place with your entire board. So we're shifting from a mindset of the board needs to approve things in order to be accountable to realizing that there is more accountability when the staff makes the decisions and the board double checks them. I see some nods. Are you feeling this at all? It takes a little bit to make a mindset shift, and you don't have to make the whole leap today. Obviously, your whole board isn't here with you, but this is a really important shift. Also, from this idea that leaders are responsible for all of the leadership, to understanding that great leadership combines great leaders with a great leadership system. But there are two parts here. And that from I need my board to do a lot of stuff to I need my board to check a lot of stuff. Somebody once asked me when I was first teaching this, like, well, what is my board going to do if we're not making a lot of decisions? And that's one of the things we talk about when we do board retreats is we help reveal to boards that just checking all this stuff is a ton of work and probably the most that they could even handle as a board. So to make this transition, you can't just, reverse engineer it exactly, right? To have a happy impact board doing these 5 steps, you need to be learning how to check progress. You need to be getting the entire board kind of buying into these mindset shifts and learning these 5 steps, bringing along slow adopters, installing a leadership system, mapping out leadership roles. There's a lot that goes into a full transformation. And yes, I love that, Michael. I need my board to check a lot of stuff. Yes. And if you have board members who don't want to check things, they don't need to be on your board because they already, even in the old system, needed to be checking stuff to doing that. So anyway, to help boards transition, I wanted to create an opportunity for boards to be able to make this change. And actually, it takes a day or even less to get entire boards moving in this new direction. And then the results from that happen very, very, very quickly because we're talking about much clearer, easier to learn system. And that is why I created the Impact Retreat. And Lauren, who's here, her picture's here too. Lauren obviously had a great experience at our last one. Another board member shared at a previous virtual retreat, when I signed up to do this today, I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll probably sit in on about an hour. Does it sound like any of your former board members? And then I'm going to go on with my day. And I stayed for every minute of it. And I think it was incredibly impactful. I always love a testimonial like Luke over here who said, just do it. We have a pretty good time. In the board retreat, we do team building. I have a whole overview if you want to learn more, so I'm not going to go in depth of these because I want to save time for Q&A. I teach the whole understanding the nonprofit business model so that board members actually have a really in-depth understanding of what is it that we're double checking when we're looking at a strategy. You have to understand how nonprofits work as businesses in order to even be thinking about whether or not a strategy makes sense. We go not into the whole impact method, but we teach that nonprofit leadership blueprint so that boards can really do that double checking around, do we have the right leader in place? Do we have enough leaders? Who's doing what? That's usually a very revealing activity for boards. We teach boards how to provide leadership in this new context. And we teach them the key shifts to becoming an even better board once they've adopted doing these 5 roles. There's 3 ways to participate in the Impact Retreat. Oh, and Jamie has shared, she was at our last retreat and she said, I observed a recent board retreat and it was a great experience. Board members who started skeptical finished the retreat with full buy-in to the changes. Thank you so much for saying that, Jamie, because one of the things that I'm most proud of about this retreat is the amount of transformation that happens so quickly. Because I like results and I especially like real results fast, and it's amazing to watch what happens. So there's 3 ways to participate in this. For those of you who need the one-on-one work just with me, we can do that in person. I'm going to show you how to schedule a call with me to talk about that as an option. But for most of you, the virtual Impact Retreat, where we actually do it with a small group of boards, join me live virtually through Zoom. And we have 2 dates. November 6th, I'm closing that one really soon. So if you're like, oh my God, I have to have that date, we need to know right away. But for many of you, to give you time to get your boards to all say, yes, we want to come. It's all board members are invited for the one price. March 12th is going to be the next retreat after that. Deborah asks, will this work for brand new boards or revamped boards? Both. I mean, the great thing about a brand new board is you don't have to, get rid of any old habits. But most people, I think everybody who has come through the virtual retreat so far has been a board that needed to revamp. In fact, We had one board go through it before their first retreat. They were totally dysfunctional. Like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. They did the retreat. Then, and actually not even the entire board came to that first retreat. Then they brought on a new board member who came to the next retreat. And that new board member commented, our board would never be anything like these old examples. And literally the old examples, like what came partly from their exact board. So they had zero idea that just 3 months earlier, the board they had joined had been in total disarray. Also, if any of you have been thinking about joining the Thrive program, it's a big commitment. It's a year-long program, but if you have been on the edge, the Impact Retreat is included for Thrive participants, so there's no extra fee to join that. Now it's time for bonuses. So, because I want to make sure you don't forget what you need to do. If you don't want to share your email address with everybody in your chat, change it from everyone to just me. Find me, Sarah Olivieri, and put your email address where you want these sent to in there. And I'm going to use that list to email all these resources to you after I'm off here. Also, I have another gift for you because I like to give out gifts. I just decided to put this in last night. I wanted everybody, people, like I said in the beginning, my teaching doesn't matter if you don't take action and implement it, right? I like teaching, but I like the results better. So for those of you who are going to be the action takers right away, if you register that's a week from today, October 25th, that's Tuesday, I'm going to give you the ability to have $255 off the Impact Retreat, which means your entire board can have a retreat with me for $995. It's like totally unheard of. It's going to be life-changing. You can use it for either date. When you go, there's going to be a link when you get the replay, and I'll send you an email with this link to the page that's about the Impact Retreat. There's a full walkthrough of what's in the retreat. And at the bottom of this page, when you scroll down, you'll see the 3 options. Once you click on an Enroll Now button, you'll see a little form to fill out your information. Once you go to step 2, I have that saved here. Under discount code, you're going to put in the word Impact, lowercase or uppercase, doesn't matter. It's going to automatically bring your price down to $995. You can even choose this payment plan, which doesn't cost anything extra, and spread it out over 5 weeks. It'll also take the discount there. This discount code will expire in a week. So you have 1 week if you want to make me very happy and take action. So great. I see people are sending me their email addresses, and I want to take some time, a few extra minutes for Q&A. And Sarah asked, what time frame for the Impact Retreat, start and ending time? So we start the retreat, I believe, at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, which seems to work for the West Coasters as well as the East Coasters. And we end sometime between 3 and 4. The last one I did, I identified some ways to shorten the day without reducing the results at all. So I'm hoping, because honestly, one of the biggest impediments for people is getting board members to commit to a day. So I'm going to do my very best, and I will send out updates about the end time on that. We do take a lunch break and breaks in between. But 10 a.m. will be the start time, Eastern, for that. Any other questions? And I know, Jamie, I promised to get back to your question. So I just want to clarify, put your question in the chat, or you feel free to come off mute. Jamie, when you asked your question about shared leadership, were you thinking between the board and the staff, or between 2 CEO types?
I would say between the board and the staff. So if the organization doesn't have a single CEO, but a leadership team of 3 or more people.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And there's a couple scenarios here that I want to address. And does anybody else have a similar situation going on? Shared leadership is something that has been talked about in the past between kind of shared leadership, partnership is a word I hear used sometimes between the staff and the board. Now, I don't think this is an effective or clear way to do it, but sometimes it is a reality for a certain amount of time when you don't have really paid staff yet. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're in that phase is that there are some people who may be on your board, but maybe also acting as leaders. And that's where learning that leadership blueprint really comes into place, because those people need to be very good at realizing what seat they're sitting on in or what hat they're wearing. So are they wearing their board hat, or are they sitting in some sort of critical function of the organization, if you will, like some piece of running the organization, which we teach in the blueprint. So then once we're talking about what functions of running the organization and making those decisions, everything actually in the model that I teach, I call it distributed leadership. So that way it makes it easier for more people to be taking on leadership roles. And, a paradigm shift that comes about is, oftentimes because we're thinking in that hierarchical mode that so many of us are used to working in, we think, oh, the CEO is just the top person in charge. But actually, when we dig into the leadership blueprint, we realize there's another way of thinking about leadership where we may have 2, 3, or more leadership partners. But we're also not saying, oh, well, Jamie, you and I have the same role. We're saying Sarah's in charge of leading these pieces, and Jamie's in charge of leading these other pieces. And we're sharing leadership for the whole organization because we've split up what things need to be led. Does that help answer your question? Awesome. Other questions? Oh, I see them coming in. Okay. Deborah asked suggestions about how to start or revamp the board. We have members, but no procedures or clear tasks. So I think, if you start with exactly these 5 steps and use it as a checklist, then you'll kind of have your to-dos in place. So as you use it as a checklist, if you're answering, no, we don't have that, then you know that there is work for your staff to be done. It is okay if you're in reboot state, and sometimes nonprofits get stuck in startup mode for like 20 years, 30 years, right? This doesn't happen in the for-profit space. People who don't make it out of startup mode, they go under and they close. But nonprofits will stay open almost indefinitely in startup phase. So it's normal. It can be normal to be answering no. That just means there's work and you need to be checking extra closely on things where you've answered no. Otherwise, I would say when people are in startup mode, don't grow too quickly, right? Have 3 solid board members, then move to 5. Then maybe you can move up a little more than that. But a small, effective group is enough. The real thing to work on when you're starting or revamping is building up your staff as quickly as possible. All volunteer-run organizations are very limited in how big they can grow and how much impact they can make. There's like a ceiling, and you're not really going to go above that ceiling until you switch to a paid staff model. So I highly encourage you to be thinking about how do we get, and actually it's the first 2 hires that are most important. You need a CEO usually, and then the very first next thing that needs to happen ASAP is that CEO then needs to hire, usually an executive assistant is the next best hire. Once you have those 2 in place, you can start growing much more quickly. Crystal asks, our board does not need to be revamped, but as the ED, I could use the tools. Do you have a price and resources for the tools you provide for leaders? Yes, Crystal, I'm going to send you, if you go to pivotground.com/application, you can apply for the Thrive program. And if you're approved, I'll put it in here so that I can paste the link in the chat. I'll send you a free training about how all that stuff works, and all the pricing and everything you need to know about the program. So anyone who's interested in the Thrive program, this is the place to go. And we teach all those things. Jamie has been, she's participates sometimes in our Thrive coaching calls. She can maybe give you a little taste about what it's like if you'd like. I'm going to look through, check for other questions. Stan, shared leadership among the CEO types in a multifaceted, great, I just answered yours. And in that nonprofit leadership model, actually, we really follow at the top level of leadership a really clear differentiation between deciding where we're going to go and deciding when we're going to go there. Those are two really different types of decisions that often having two separate people makes a big difference in those roles. Not everyone's big enough right away to have, two kind of top thinking leaders. Okay, how do we get access to the recording? You will have access to the recording on the very page where you access this live training. As soon as the recording is up, I will send you a link back to the same page you've already been to. And so you'll know it's there. Excellent. Deborah says, thanks so much. Where to search for new board members. On my YouTube channel, I actually have a training about using LinkedIn for this. Oh, and Jamie, could you repost what you just posted to everyone? It was direct message to me. So finding new board members. So there's an interesting thing that happens here. You can certainly network. Chambers of commerce are great locations. There are literally like associations of Latino potential board members, associations of different people, from different communities who've come together, who are underrepresented on boards. Typically, they want to be there, and they've made it easy for you to find them by creating organizations where they're all clustered together, ready to go. I like LinkedIn because LinkedIn gives people the option to like click a button, say I'm interested in volunteering on a board. So that's like a database of like thousands of board members. But one thing, I'm hugely in favor of having a diverse board in every meaning of the word. And I'm hugely in favor of every and all sorts of training and efforts we can do to eliminate systemic biases and inequities within our work. But I have to tell you that one of the biggest steps you can do, even more than diversifying your board, is when you're using that old structure that we talked about in the beginning, you're just like bucket dumping, fire hose dumping that system that perpetuates systemic biases and inequities into your board. And probably one of the best things you can do first is turn off the fire hose, right? And then, yes, is it good to have a diverse set of board members? Absolutely. But does it matter as much in this new system? Not quite as much, because one, that group is not making the decisions, and two, we've turned off the fire hose of inviting people who are looking to perpetuate their own status of privilege by participating on your board. Does that make sense to people, right? I'm definitely not saying don't focus on DEI, but I'm saying this is one of the most powerful things you can do to improve things in your organization. Name of my YouTube channel, Pivot Ground. I'll make sure I include a link to it. Pivot Ground is the YouTube channel. And if you send me an email asking for that one, I will dig it out for you. But you got to remind me with an email. So what's the training there? Like, I think I have like 70 something mini trainings on YouTube. And it's the one about finding board members on LinkedIn. Excellent. Any questions? Feel free to come off mute. I've got just a couple more minutes here. Wonderful. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, Jamie shared that the best part of Thrive is you have an entire team of people to troubleshoot common issues. We meet weekly, all sorts of things come up. It's really fun, in addition to complete training and structures and processes and everything. And even Jamie says, I learned something new every time. Michael says, I'm glad that are, yes, excellent. We're hoping we'll be back, bring our new board to Thrive. Excellent. Yay. Wonderful. Wonderful, Michael. Oh, thank you, Michael, for finding the YouTube channel link. Excellent. I really appreciate that. So there it is, youtube.com/C/pivot ground. I know it's the secret code name. And if you look, there's actually a playlist called micro trainings in there. And that is where all the micro trainings are. You'll find lots of good stuff in there. Excellent. All right, I think I've got them all. Stan, thank you for subscribing. I also, by the way, go live on YouTube and in other places every week, every Wednesday, usually around 2:15, and I give you a little taste of what has just happened in the Thrive coaching call, which also happens on Wednesday afternoons, and try to give you just a few little nuggets of gold that came out of that. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to wrap up today. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. Please, 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 whatever you do, use this training, put it into action. If you have any questions or concerns, you have my email address. Just send me an email and I would be happy to address them, because I most of all want you to take action and see the kind of results that I know you're looking for. All right. Bye, everybody.